Hi, I'm Adam Lucente. Welcome back to the Monitor Brief. 2025 is setting up to be an intriguing year for the Middle East economy. OPEC Plus has extended its oil supply cuts, and Etihad Airways is preparing for a major IPO. War continues in the region, and there has been a major political change in Syria with the ouster of President Assad. And with former President Donald Trump preparing to return to the White House, the region is bracing for the effect his tariff policies might have. My guest this episode is Monitor's senior market research analyst, Sam Wendel. Sam has reported extensively on a variety of Middle East economic topics and provided a clear overview of the region's outlook heading into 2025. Hope you enjoy. Sam, welcome back to the Monitor Brief.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
How would you describe the state of the Middle East economy heading into 2025?
Yeah, I mean, after a challenging 2024, the forecasts have GDP growth, for the Middle East improving in 2025. That's mostly on the back of higher Gulf oil production, but these forecasts have, or come with plenty of uncertainty. I mean, oil prices are expected to sit around $70 a barrel this year in 2025. And, in December, OPEC Plus like to push back the start of output increases again, this time until April. And they postponed the full unwinding of cuts until the end of 2026. So there's some big question marks as we head into 2025. But the IMF, as of October, was anticipating 4% economic growth in 2025 for the Middle East and North Africa. And that's up from 2.1% in 2024. So that's significant.
And what are just a follow up, what are some of the drivers of that growth and the positive projections there?
Well, based on everything we're seeing, that's mainly oil growth could return. But, last year the IMF ended up cutting those began cutting their sort of growth forecast throughout the year. So, we're heading into the year with relatively bullish forecasts, but that could also easily go a different direction.
Gotcha. And on the Middle East business front, what are some issues or developments we should be paying attention to in 2025?
As just mentioned, the oil demand and OPEC plus decisions are big storylines to watch. But, as 2024 showed, the ongoing conflict in the Middle East is going to be, is going to loom over the economic outlook in the coming months. And now we've got Trump 2.0 to consider. And I think, how the new U.S. administration influences the region, that storyline is going to suck up a lot of coverage. But, beyond that, one trend I'm watching is, what's next for Egypt, after securing some 50 plus billion from the IMF and other backers in 2024. The coming year is going to be important for, efforts to turn its economy around. And as with recent years, Gulf countries, in the midst of their ambitious economic diversification drives, they're going to continue to drive headlines, spanning everything from the energy transition to AI and sports and beyond.
Going back to the Trump effect, so to speak, we're weeks away from the former president returning to the White House, and you've covered this recently, so I want to ask, how might his proposed tariffs on China affect the Middle East?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the Middle East is probably going to be relatively insulated from the protectionist pressures that, are most likely going to ratchet up when Trump takes office. And, looking at, I mean, Trump has proposed universal tariffs that would include the Middle East, but bilateral trade between the United States and the Middle East is pretty modest, even for key trade partners in the region. But ripple effects from a global trade war between the United States and China would be felt in the Middle East. And so the big question here is how these tariffs will impact China's economy, because this will influence demand for, Gulf energy exports. Yeah, the Middle East is a top supplier of oil to China, and their trade links have been growing in recent years. I think the most recent year that we have good data for was 2022, where China's bilateral goods trade volume with the Middle East and North Africa was nearly 400 billion, which was up from about 300 billion in 2021. So the region is insulated, but it's still exposed to these tariffs in different ways.
And finally, another thing you wrote recently was about the strong year for initial public offerings, IPOs, in the region in 2024. What challenges do Middle East IPOs face now in 2025?
Heading into the year, the pipeline for IPOs is still pretty good looking, and there are some pretty interesting assets that people are hoping come to market. One would be Etihad Airways, which would become the first major Gulf airline to list. But recently, we've had some major mega listings that generate a lot of demand, but once shares debuted, they have underperformed, and that's kind of a warning sign. So there's some questions about valuations, and companies that are preparing to list right now are really going to be watching that performance in the short term, because that will impact their own listing plans. So like ultimately, I think that IPOs are still going to be coming, but there's just now there's some question marks that may influence that outlook.
Okay, Sam, thank you very much for your time on these issues, and we look forward to more of your reporting on the topics soon.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Adam.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the L Monitor Brief. Follow L Monitor for more on the stories impacting the region.